Imagine a city where every building is a sentence. Not a metaphor. A real, physical sentence, expressed in tons of concrete and steel. 40 million square kilometers from the Baltic Sea to the Pacific Ocean are covered with identical boxes. The same grey facade in Tallinn and Tashkent. The same 5-story building in Minsk and Vladivostok. It's as if a giant stamp has been pressed across 1/6 of the land, turning different peoples, cultures, and histories into a single mass. In the smoking crater of the Russian Empire, the Bolsheviks did not merely seek to govern. They sought to engineer a new biological species. This era marks the most radical socio-architectural experiment in human history. A brief, incandescent moment. A moment where the boundary between the political and the personal was obliterated. By the straight line, and the right angle. The architects of the Avant-Garde declared war on the very concept of home as a sanctuary. To them, the bourgeois apartment, with its cozy kitchen and private knickknacks, was a petri dish for individualism. A disease that had to be cured. Through spatial sterilization. They introduced the social condenser. Buildings designed not to shelter, but to collide humans together. Forcing them to shed their private selves. And merge into a collective organism. From the gravity-defying horizontal skyscrapers of El Lisitsky. To the communal austerity of the Narkomfin building. This was a desperate, geometric attempt to build a paradise of glass and concrete. On a foundation of famine. It remains a story of how a dream of total transparency eventually crashed against the messy reality of human nature. Leaving behind breathtaking forms that stand as monuments to a future that never arrived. If the avant-garde was a laboratory for the future, the Stalinist era was a fortress of a reinvented past. By the early 1930s, the chaotic geometry of the revolution was deemed insufficient. The state no longer required an architecture of equality. It demanded an architecture of awe. The Stalinkas emerged as a terrifying pivot toward socialist realism in stone. This style was characterized not by function, but by a heavy, theatrical grandeur. It was designed to induce a specific psychological cocktail. Personal insignificance, mixed with overwhelming imperial pride. Moscow was surgically altered to become the capital of a red empire. The palaces for the people, the marble-clad metro stations and the soaring Seven Sisters skyscrapers, were cathedrals for a secular religion. They were a visual code of abundance. In a time of scarcity. A facade of bronze and granite. That concealed the gulag labor used to quarry it. This era presents a paradox. A regime that crushed the individual, while building the most beautiful public spaces of the 20th century. Creating a cityscape where every column whispered, "You are temporary. The state is forever." With the death of Stalin, the empire of granite and gold collapsed. Not under the weight of war, but under the sheer inefficiency of its own grandeur. Nikita Khrushchev, a leader devoid of imperial romanticism, looked at the housing crisis and saw a mathematical problem. Not an aesthetic one. He initiated the most ruthless aesthetic lobotomy in modern history. Architecture was stripped of its status as high art. It was reclassified as industrial design. A matter of logistics, tonnage, and speed. Enter the Khrushchevka. The 5-story prefabricated concrete box that conquered 1/6 of the Earth's landmass. This was the moment the Soviet Union attempted to solve homelessness by turning the construction site into an assembly line. Treating buildings like loaves of bread, to be baked and stacked. It is a story of paradoxical liberation. These cramped apartments offered millions their first escape from the hell of communal living. Yet, the price was a terrifying homogenization of the landscape. From the Baltic to the Pacific, the view from the window became identical. Creating a shared, monotonous consciousness that defined the late Soviet soul. As the political fervor of the revolution cooled into the bureaucratic frost of the Brezhnev stagnation, the Soviet architectural mind sought escape. It found it not on Earth, but in the cosmos. While grocery store shelves grew empty and ideology ossified, the architecture of public spaces exploded into a frenzy of futuristic brutalism. This era is a fascinating study in cognitive dissonance. No longer bound by the strict utilitarianism of Khrushchev, or the classical dogmas of Stalin, architects began to design as if they were colonizing Mars, rather than Siberia. We witnessed the rise of Soviet modernism. Heavy, gravity-defying concrete structures resembling landed spaceships, alien temples, and robotic giants. From the Druzhba Holiday Center in Yalta, balancing precariously on giant legs, to the Ministry of Highways in Georgia, which looks like a glitch in the Matrix. These buildings were desperate attempts to project a future that was slipping away. It was a stage set of science fiction, built to distract citizens from the grayness of reality. Concrete dreams, grounded in a crumbling empire. When the Soviet Union dissolved, the state monopoly on aesthetics evaporated overnight. The result was not a return to order. It was a violent explosion of architectural anarchy. This era, often derisively termed capitalist romanticism, represents the unfiltered psychological projection of a traumatized society, suddenly flooded with cash and freedom. The gray discipline of the communist era was replaced by a screaming, hallucinatory desire to be different. To be loud. To be rich. To be anything but Soviet. Red brick castles with medieval turrets sprouted in potato fields. Glass office towers were adorned with plastic Greek statues. This was the architecture of the Nouveau Riche. A desperate, incoherent attempt to mimic Western luxury, without understanding its grammar. The city became a battlefield of egos. A visual cacophony of mirrored glass and faux gold. It remains the most hated, yet perhaps the most honest, period in Russian history. A built environment that perfectly mirrored the lawlessness, energy, and confusion of a superpower in freefall. As the dust of the chaotic 90s settled, the Russian state returned as the supreme architect. But this time, it wore the sleek suit of a corporate developer. The wild, personalized kitsch of the oligarchs was bulldozed, making way for the sterile, globalized glass of the technocrat. This era is defined by a new social contract. The government offers comfort, digitization, and European-style public spaces in exchange for political silence. It is the age of gentrification as ideology. We explore the rise of the human anthills, or kelevanics. Colossal, 30-story residential walls that encircle major cities, offering density without community. Contrast this with the immaculate, manicured showcases like Moscow City, designed to project an image of efficiency. Yet, beneath the polished granite and QR codes, lies a profound hollowness. The architecture has lost its desire to shape the future. Instead, it seeks to anesthetize the present. It is a sterile, frictionless environment, where urban improvement serves as a mask for control. A speculative conclusion. By the late 2020s, the social contract of the megacity had fractured. The human anthills, once sold as efficient vertical neighborhoods, had devolved into high-density ghettos of surveillance and contagion. The pendulum of history, having swung to the extreme of centralization, violently recoiled. This final chapter chronicles the exodus, the flight of the middle class from the transparent panopticon of the metropolis into the vast, silent hinterlands. We enter the age of neo-isolationism, where architecture ceases to be a medium of communication and becomes a technology of concealment. We see the rise of the autonomous cluster. Heavily fortified, off-grid settlements hidden in the forests of Karelia, or the Altai Mountains. These are not the wooden dachas of the past. They are self-sustaining fortresses equipped with server farms and AI-driven perimeters. It is the architecture of paranoia, where success is measured not by visibility, but by how effectively one remains unseen by the state's drones. The city dissolves into an archipelago of closed, feudal estates, marking the end of the public sphere. The Russian expanse, historically a terrifying void, finally becomes the ultimate luxury. A place to disappear.